here at the Texas Theater. 4 Days in Dallas, Natural Born Killers with Oliver Stone. Now showing Natural Born Killers. Woo! Hey guys.
So as you can see, Oliver is going to join us after the showing, but let's...
Welcome to Dallas!
Yeah, give it...
Hey everybody, welcome back. You're welcome, you're very, very welcome. So Oliver's going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes, so I'm going to vamp. The first thing I want to say about this is I haven't seen this on a big screen in about 8 years, and every time I see this movie, it feels more current somehow.
Yes.
You know, and when Oliver knows this, and he may actually kind of rib me a bit about it. But the first time I saw this movie, I didn't like it. I didn't like it, and it gradually, and I couldn't get it out of my mind, and gradually, slowly but surely, it sort of took root in my imagination, and now it's probably one of my top 3 or 4 of his movies. And I think he was ahead of the curve, and all the people who worked on this movie were ahead of the curve, and it was just this non-stop barrage of imagery that didn't give you a second to contemplate anything. And I remember thinking at the time, like, this is too much, this is too fast, this is too everything. But now it feels like it's kind of just right. And the other thing that becomes more astonishing to me the further I get away from the original release of this movie 30 years ago, in August, they dumped it, and it was a hit anyway, is I cannot believe that a major studio released this. That's unthinkable to me that this would happen. Like you know, once in a while you'll get something like this happening, but it's comparatively rarer than it was in the 90s, and it was rarer in the 90s than it was in the 80s, and rarer in the 80s than it was in the 70s. And it almost feels like an outlier. And this was, I guess, film number 9 in this incredible streak that Oliver had, which included Salvador, let me see if I can do it in order, Salvador, Platoon, Wall Street, Talk Radio, Born on the 4th of July, The Doors, JFK, Heaven and Earth, Natural Born Killers, and Nixon.
Yeah.
Wow. And you had, like, you know, Vanity. He was such a powerful force in the culture that Vanity Fair, I'll never forget this. Vanity Fair arrives in my mailbox, and here's Oliver. I was just saying, you were such a prominent cultural force that right a couple of years after this movie came out, Vanity Fair arrived in my mailbox, and on the cover it's like inside peek at Nixon, and it was all like guys in suits. You joked about that. It's like,
yeah, that was a very difficult movie to make and to sell.
Yeah.
Because it was all white men in suits with bad haircuts. That was the truth. That was Nixon's second term.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was very, I like that movie a lot, and I think it holds up for me. It's 3 hours and about 15, I think.
Yeah.
So it's long for an audience, and a lot of talk, but those who appreciate what's going on beneath the surface, I think would love that film. More intelligentsia have written me saying that is their favorite. It's surprising. Diplomats from all over the world, people who know what's going on in government, they think it's pretty shocking.
So as you were coming back in, I was saying, you know, I cannot even believe this was released by a major studio, this movie.
That was a battle too. I remember the first time we showed this to the Warner Brothers executives. Essentially, it was a small screening room, and Bob Daly, Terry Semmel, and various others, plus me and a few people and my agent. they were livid. They walked out. They said, "We'll talk about it later." And they went out with my agent was one of my agents was Mike Ovitz, who was pretty powerful, and Mike went out. He came back. Mike was white. He just said, I'll fix this." They're pretty pissed off, at least. But you know, they said basically that you have a contract to deliver an R film. You cannot deliver an NC-7. What was it? And at that time, it
NC-17. Yeah,
it was NC. You cannot deliver an NC-17. That was their comment. You better deliver, otherwise it's going to be a disaster. But this is a hard film to get released, and I literally had to go back to the Motion Picture Association several times. You know, I'd been through that battle with De Palma. I hadn't been personally, but he'd done Scarface, so we went through that, and he got so fed up with the process, he just gave up. And he said, I'm not going to do any more, and they gave it an R finally.
yeah.
So now this is happening to me years later, and I couldn't understand what they were objecting to, but I kept cutting. It was basically the chaos, and that comes through still, that I was worried about. I lost a lot of great graphic shots, which you've seen, I think, in the director's cut, which is things like, as you mentioned, Tommy Lee Jones's head on the pike. And when Mallory shoots Downey's hand, I made a big hole in the hand so that she saw it. It was very funny. Stuff like that they just didn't understand and didn't care for. But it became redundant. I mean, I couldn't cut anything. I couldn't understand what can I do? The whole thing is a fucking chaos. And that was really the truth. And they ran up against that wall finally and said, shrugged and said, okay. And it becomes a war of attrition. But so that this cut got out and did surprisingly well, because it was August and they dumped it in the end of August, the last week of August, which is in those days was dog days, and there was August was a dead month. But we revitalized that day. It became, now since that movie in 1993, they have released dozens of movies in the last week of August, and they worked. So you understand, it was a change. It was a revolution. You know.
What prompted you to want to do this movie? Like the one you'd made before this was Heaven and Earth.
Yeah.
Which was much. I mean, I wouldn't call it a gentle movie exactly, but it's not like this. You know.
Well, Heaven and Earth is its own story because it's based on her book, and a lot of anger in it. Yeah, but it was a story of healing and a Buddhist story of reconciliation, and I loved that film. I made this movie out of disgust, I suppose, disgust with the media landscape. Yes. Really, that was a time when, if you remember correctly, O.J. Simpson was a culmination of a period when TV and news became more and more sensational, more and more tabloid, and it's stayed that way, basically. It just seemed to me, after growing up in television and being as sick as you can get, because American television can coarsen your mentality. You know, there's a lot of violence anyway, pre this movie, but so I threw it back at them, and they had no sense of humor about it. Young people went, but it was a tough. It was just disgust about the whole way the world was turning, and I think the 90s was the beginning of this. I don't know, some of you are very young, so you don't remember this, but America has not become what I wanted it to become. And after 2000, we went to the dogs, the shit house, you know. This is the shit house. Leonard Cohen, murder. It's more than murder. It's a murder that's spiritual. It's a murder that's destroying. It's a love of war, a love of violence. It's in our country. It's deep.
Did you have anybody at Warner Brothers or anybody at the ratings board who explained to you exactly what the objection was? Was it tone?
No,
was it tone? You think?
No, I would go back and I'd say, and then you say, well, this shot, that shot, and I try to make it as specific as possible. So, and it was Hefner at that time. He was a smart man. He wasn't stupid, but listen, this film helped like a lot of other filmmakers because after this it became lights out. I mean, it seems tamer now perhaps than
this.
Well, I mean, you have to admit that they broke all the rules after this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, but you know, here's what's interesting to me, among other things about this movie, is all of your other films, they certainly don't shy away from the darker aspects of the human experience. They confront them directly, but you always have some kind of a moral framework or a moral compass. You have Jim Garrison in JFK. You have Chris Taylor being, you know, with his soul being struggled over in Platoon. And you have, you know, Charlie Sheen in Wall Street is literally torn between a good dad and a bad dad. And here you really, like Mickey and Mallory have an emotional anchor, which is their love for each other, but there's no moral anchor point in this. We're kind of adrift, and we have to make up our own minds about why we feel what we feel, why we think what we think, and no wonder people had issues with this.
Well, I don't agree with you on this, Matt, as you know. I do find that Mickey says it well. He says, from where I am, you're another species, Wade. You have to understand that they do have a morality. They do between themselves. And, but they're a product of our civilization, bottom line.
The young critic Michael Guarnieri, who was had a piece in the book that I wrote about your work and your life, he said that he felt like this was another Vietnam film in a way. What do you think about that?
Well, how many Vietnams have we had, you know? I mean, are we in the middle of another one? This comes back. It was a war that should have been dealt with, atoned for, remembered. And as you know, I made 3 Vietnam movies. I tried to make Me Lai, too. That's a 4th one. That was nixed. I couldn't get that off the ground. So, I mean, it's Vietnam Redux, yes. I mean, this is a war. What's going on now, the way I see it, is a disastrous war. I mean, Mr. Biden or whatever, this administration has sought has sought this kind of conflict, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. I don't want to get into specifics because people are going to fight and disagree, but I think it's a very dangerous time for us. We provoked not only Russia, but we provoked Israel, the Arabic Middle East, and we're provoking China. And I'm sorry, people may not understand, but we are very aggressive, and this is in our genes. This is the American way, and I'm part of that generation, and I understand it, but I can't condone it, and I think it's wrong, wrong, wrong. Bad, bad, bad.
When you came back from Vietnam, you I believe still have shrapnel in your body from that experience, right?
Yeah. It does go off on X-rays and stuff. Deep homeland security, you know. No, it's fine. I recovered from all that because I reconciled. I mean, 3 movies is plenty of. I remember it as a learning experience. I was very young. Remember, very young. You don't see the world the same way when you're 21.
No. But I'm curious about. I remember when I was interviewing you for the book, I asked you, you know, do you still go to the shooting range? You were like, no. It's not a thing you do.
No.
You don't have any. You don't really, except for the kind of reading the news and seeing movies that may contain violence. You just left. You have no interest in seeking that out. You seem very meditative every time I've talked to you.
Thank you. That's probably Laylee's influence since 1993. She took me back, and I understand the Vietnamese side of it and what we did to them. So my empathy is worldwide.
You have shrines. You have incense. You have, you know, I know that you meditate. you know, his backyard of his house is extraordinary. It's like a little, almost like a little kind of enchanted jungle.
Thank you.
You know.
Yeah, it's a haven from the world.
How do you concentrate? How do you focus? How do you work? Like, what is your process when you're honing an idea?
Well, you know, I'm a writer, and after you write it, you want to direct it. That's a process, and I was also very involved in the editing, so it's and the release. So it's a flowering and coming to. The process of writing is very solitary for the most part, although I have worked with other writers, but we worked alone. And you know, writing is the same all over the world. You'd have to be solitary, ass plus seat, and very, very concentrated. In hotel rooms or at my house, whatever, it doesn't change.
You have a lot, so you
have to allot hours to it. You have to say, I'm going to sit down and do this for this next 3-4 hours.
Speaking of the directorial aspects of it, I've seen storyboards for so many of your movies, and there were some for the special effects shots in this. But I know that the production, it was a very intuitive process, wasn't it? Of how you shot it and what you chose to shoot.
Well, it's nice to prepare, isn't it? It's prepare as much as you can, prepare well, try to think it through. But even so, the chaos on the set is such that so much is going to happen during the process from the actors, from the crew, from the people around you, that you're going to change things. And I'm trying to stay loose. You know, I don't fall in love with my script. I fall in love with the idea of advancing this scene as far as possible. And sometimes an actor has another idea of how it works, and you're not used to it. You're not ready for it, and it's quite magical to find that to agree to change, but not all the time.
What was your relationship like? Your collaborative relationship with Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis on this?
Oh, Woody, I was the most sane of the actors. I mean, it was I enjoyed the experience, but I was pretty wild too. You know, Juliette, Tom Sizemore, and Robert Downey were out there. Tommy Lee was in his own world. It was his idea to. Well, when he came in, he said, you know, I want make my costumes small. He's a big guy, and he really made those suits fly.
Whose idea was the grooming on Tommy Lee Jones in this movie? The hair, the mustache, which I don't believe has ever existed before.
A lot of that came from him. Yeah. Well, he was a cartoon character. McCluskey is sort of a character out of the. Remember the little bird? There was a little bird. What was the name of the bird? Tweety?
Yeah.
Who was the cat?
Sylvester.
Sylvester. Well, Sylvester was sort of an idea.
Who would Tweety be?
Well, in his mind, he wanted to kill Mickey and Mallory no matter what.
Yeah.
But he had to do it legally, so he used this Tom Sizemore character. Yeah, to kill him.
Whose idea was it to have Woody shave his head?
That was sort of. I like the Apocalypse Now kind of imagery, but no, I think it was in the script. It came from the script, and you know, the three of us were working very hard on it. And there was also the Tarantino original, but they all blended my mind. I can't tell you. They are available publicly. You can read it. But we made quite a few, quite a lot of changes, and it did make him happy. But
yeah, the evolution of your style during this period is so fascinating because we
went to the end of a certain process. After you go through this, you don't want to do it again. I mean, it's just if you do it every time, it becomes. I mean, I would do it again, but it was. I like to try a new style every time, pretty much.
Do it again.
Natural Born Killers 2, which brings up the ending. Obviously, to me, there's a flaw. When you see this guy Owen, who comes out of nowhere, and he's played by a wonderful actor Arliss Howard, and he says, "Come in here, Mickey." That was originally set up so that he would kill them in the end. He was the guy who. it takes him in the van. He's in the back of the van. He's very quiet the whole time, and at the end of the movie, he kills them. He kills them, and that was the payoff. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I liked them too much, and I wanted to annoy all these people who tell me in American movies the killers have to die in the end. The bad guys, you know, they're not bad guys to me. So screw them.
You know, you're sitting in a room full of people who would love to see more stuff like this and that kind of. You know.
Well, there's a lot of filmmakers are doing this kind of stuff. I mean,
no, they're not. Not really. No, I don't think so.
Well,
not like you.
It's you know, it's a mood. That was my mood in 1993 because that was the Clinton period. You know, when the globalism, the neoliberal ideas were happening, and something was wrong. I felt something was wrong because we'd also gone back to war with Iraq. Remember, Iraq 1 happened in '91, and Panama happened in '89. So the sickness was back.
You're wrong, Oliver. 2024 needs you more now.
2024 needs you more now.
Oh yeah, man. Jesus Christ, what's going on? It's staggering. It's staggering in its awfulness.
So how does it feel being back in Dallas?
Being back in Dallas, it's fun. You know, I had a great time here. It was a source of great inspiration at that time because Texas was coming alive as a filmmaking center. I came down here in '88, '89, and it was all happening. There was nobody really, I mean, there was a couple of filmmakers, I think Robert Rodriguez, they said, you can use Las Colinas. They made a great deal. It was brand new. And I wanted to shoot Long Island 1940s, 50s with Tom Cruise, which was being set up. We were setting that up. Long Island looks like Dallas in that film because it was. I got criticized by some reviewers who said, "Oh, it looks too barren. You know, there's more trees." No, Long Island at that time was like that. They were big skies, big Texas skies, and it was being built up. The trees grew in later, so it felt like Texas. It felt like Massachusetts, Long Island, and people were great. The extra pool was huge. Talented people, theatrical people. It was clearly happening, and the commission was great. The prices were great. The right to work state made it easier for us because the unions were killing us. I couldn't do this picture at the price in Los Angeles. There was a reason to make it here.
Did you? You made talk radio first.
Yeah. Talk radio.
Which is screening on Saturday, 35 millimeter in this room.
The reason was because Cruise was making Rain Man, and he couldn't be available. And 1987, I was hungry really to work, to learn. Above all, I just made Wall Street, and I wanted to go to work and know more. And talk radio was off. It was a small film. I thought I could do fast, and it had very technically complicated. But I learned a lot on that film because we were working in confined spaces. So talk radio is well worth seeing technically, but the character is pretty dark. You know, it's not me. It's more like from Eric Bogosian, and boy, it's a strong movie too.
Yeah, it definitely is. And another one that feels ahead of its time and its perceptions.
The media was getting out of hand too. There had been Alan Berg was killed, and we based part of that story on his murder because he mouthed off, and the Order got to him. The Order was the group at that time that was existent, and don't forget, well, the network had been done, the movie. You know, I mean, people were getting it, that the media was getting out of control.
When did Trent Reznor enter the process, and what did he bring to this?
Reznor came in on Natural Born Killers. Oh, this is not, they didn't have that cut, right? We were going to look for it.
No, you should explain that.
In the director's cut, Reznor's last lyric is there, right? And Trent was, I mean, a cut from his group. What was it called?
Understands, yeah.
That was, it was in there, and I don't think it was in this film. So that was one difference. But Trent was quiet, you know, one of these people who was very much into work. We brought him on. We did a lot of the work, and then we brought him in, and he was adding his thoughts. And because it was quite revolutionary, we were doing new stuff with the music. Was the music loud enough for you guys?
Awesome. Amazing soundtrack.
Because I really, my hearing is off, so it seemed it was too low. But
let the record reflect that Oliver Stone personally asked the projectionist to crank it.
So Trent came in, and it was fine. He has a certain taste, and I think he's continued his work in other films.
It's got that the use of music in this movie and the cutting and the imagery, all the different types of film stock and video that you use. It feels like it's all of a piece. How many different kinds of capture mediums did you use in this?
Everything we knew at the time, including a limited amount of CGI. But you know, we've been working our way towards that. If you look at The Doors, you'll see some of that. We'd been working our way towards it. We'd learned how to make films, and I'd say Wall Street was an end of a certain period, and then Wall Street into talk radio is technically much more sophisticated. And after that, the JFK was a culmination of the style, but we went further. After I did the classical style with Heaven and Earth, then came back, and really we got the energy up again after the JFK to go back and say, all right, let's really push it.
And U-turn is another one that I think is
U-turn is nuts. Yeah, that has a lot of the, U-turn has a lot of the, there's a desolate picture in it, but it's I like it. I don't know why, I just like it. I think it's a nutty film, very nutty, but we had fun. Everybody, it's a real film noir, you know, because everybody dies, except for the Indian and who prophesies that, and also the mechanic. He doesn't die, although we want to kill him. It's a real noir because you know it was redefined in the '90s by people making films where they didn't die. He didn't die. The people at the end of it, but the real noir, the hero should get killed.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's almost expected.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any? Like aesthetic principle that you could define that's at work here? Like was there something that guided your choices as you were making the film, as you're putting the film together, as you were finishing the film?
Yeah, break the rules. I'd have to go back to my mindset, but you know, it changes. Films, it's a different mood every time. You go into a mood for a year or two. It's a long haul. I was getting a divorce, I remember that. Yeah, that was pretty significant because it was like Robert Downey at the end throwing. No. It was kind of a liberating.
Throwing the phone at the wall.
Well, I had no place to live. I just was living out of a hotel, and you know, I had children. It was a bit. It was liberating.
On top of all the other genres that you could put this in, it's a divorce movie too.
Yeah.
Did you take me back for a second to when you did interviews for this, when the film came out? What was that experience like? What were people asking you?
I didn't enjoy what they pictured. They pictured me as a lunatic. My interviews, I tended to be incendiary because I sometimes couldn't articulate what I felt in a way that was acceptable. And you know me. I mean, you know that I said a lot of things that sounded awful, right? So you live and learn.
Well, you're in good company there. There's a lot of artists who are provocateurs for one reason or another, and I've never really felt that you've done that without reason. You know, I've never felt that you were a provocateur without reason. We may have disagreed with your reasons, but I never felt like you were doing it just to be an asshole.
No, I tried to be honest. The guy at the beginning of this process, Alex Cox, was kind of a guy who I saw as he was deliberately provoking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much questioning everything. Was there anything in this movie that you really, 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 really wanted to do? Really wanted to pull off in a certain way, and it just didn't happen. Yeah.
No, I pulled it off, and I kicked myself still because I think it would have worked. I took out the courtroom scene when just before he goes to jail. It was all set up there. It would have been great because he does reform in his head, but it takes time, you know, because he kills the guy in the yoga. So I had this wonderful courtroom scene. It's cut and it's on a deleted scene. I urge you to see it if you have a chance. Ashley Judd, who's the perfect victim here, goes on trial, and she and Mickey in this crazed world ends up being her interrogator. He becomes his defense attorney, and he's asking her all these questions and building. It's wonderfully cut. You know what I'm talking about, yeah. And at the end of the process, he asks her a question, and she's about, and he stabs her through the heart with a pencil that he has in his hand, and that's why Tommy Lee Jones is pointing to the pencil. And I just love that scene. I loved seeing that happen. I think Ashley was great in the scene, and I was really sad that I cut it because it would have been the great climax to that act.
The Bruce Lee reference, that was what I liked, the Bruce Lee reference. When he was interrogating her, he referenced Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was the best.
It was really, really something to see that Woody Harrelson's performance.
He's great, yeah. I loved him, and I knew it was in him because he does look like he looks like his father was a hitman, Charles Harrelson, and he was in jail for killing a federal judge, but there's pretty solid evidence that he was involved in the Kennedy killing, not as one of the assassins, but he was in the fringes of it.
There's been a lot of talk in the last 10 years particularly. It almost seems like we're entering kind of a neo-Puritan era in a lot of ways, where people want good and bad to be clearly defined. They want to be given some idea of what to think before they go into things. They want to be warned about things that are disturbing, so they can be prepared for it. What do you think of all that?
I don't. Society dictates rules as we go, and it's it's difficult to feel free in this world right now, to say what you feel. It's too proper for my taste, and too sensitive. And you know what I'm talking about. There was an old way of it was more the 70s and the 80s, and even the 90s were. All of a sudden, after it's all that George Bush's fault, really, that was the end. In 2000, the war on terror, it hasn't ended. It was one war after the other.
Mm-hmm. Same as it ever was.
We changed the rules. Nobody, and there was no vote taken.
If you were to give anyone who was about to go into this movie for the first time, never having seen it, just a little thought to kind of orient them about what they're going to see. Because I recommend this film to people, and more often than not, they come back going like, "What did I ever do to you?"
Yeah, what's wrong?
This is not Moonstruck.
It seems movies are too explained. We have this safety factor. I mean, everyone wants to tell you the end. The critics tell you everything. What's the point? I prefer to see movies, frankly, without knowing too much about them. If people tell you that go see this, they know there is a heartbeat, there's a pulse. I think sometimes the critics expect too much because they see too many movies, so it gets lost. The freshness gets lost. no, you can't warn people about movies. You got to go see them. That was when you were a kid. That's what we did. We saw the poster and we wanted to go see it. And there's nothing wrong with repetition. I like, there was a certain feeling on television, you get it. People want to be comfortable. They want to see something they know. That doesn't mean you have to know the story, but they want to see the same Western over and over again, but it has a different details. I think that's okay. I think that's fine. I like that too. There's certain films I just enjoy seeing again. I like a lot of old movies, so maybe I'm very 50s. I love 50s, 30s, 40s, even the 70s. I watched. Now I'm getting closer to the 80s, but I enjoy very much repetition. As Dowdy says in the film, repetition works, David.
Well, the heartbeat of this film is as strong as it ever was, and I'm really, really glad that you came out here for this, and that you're going to be with us here for 3 more days. Thank you.